Welcome back to Live With, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm Dave Palumbo, and back by popular demand, part two, we have our good friend Carl Lanore.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for coming back, Carl, because our last show was very popular, and I was taking notes. I actually learned a lot of stuff, and I think, we always have a good conversation, so I figured, hey, we got plenty more topics to discuss here.
I watched the last show, and I was just moving too fast through some of the topics, and so I promised to slow down a little bit this time.
Well, I think we felt this urgency to get everything out there. Now we figure, well, you know what, we could do a couple of these. We don't have to rush too much. So
yeah, absolutely.
We were talking. It was funny. We were talking before the show, and I think it's relevant just because I think people go through this, and I think that people can relate a lot of times to the stuff that we go through as hosts of these shows. And I was telling you about my dad. He's kind of on his deathbed at this point, and his body's shutting down. And you made a very valid, very valid observation about your dad. And tell the analogy you were telling me, because I completely related to it.
When my father got sick, I was going through my divorce, so I was able to leave Kentucky and go to Arizona. And I brought him home from the nursing home.
Right.
And I really believed I was going to reverse everything. I was going to make protein shakes for him. I was going to do all the things I knew to do, but the problem was polypharmacy really destroyed his body. His kidneys were gone. His liver was gone from all the medications he had been taking for decades. And so, we got a hospital bed for him, put him in the hospital bed, made him as comfortable as possible. He stopped eating about 4 days before he passed away. And the night before he passed away, I slept outside his door on the sofa, and I heard this noise coming from his room, and it sounded like somebody took a Tupperware tub and was like rubbing it and clacking it on the table. And later on, I learned that they called this the death rattle. I didn't know what it was. But the next day, I was in his room.
Was that his breathing, Carl, that you were hearing?
Yeah.
My dad's doing that. My dad's been doing that for 2 weeks.
Yeah, the airway starts to cave in. They have a hard time breathing in. They call it the death rattle. There's no turning back once that starts happening, because even breathing is becoming a virtual impossibility.
Yeah.
And my father, probably like your father, these guys were built tough, and they hang on and they hang on. And so I knew that that's what he was doing. And I had a talk with him, and I said, what a great father he was, and he's taught us everything we need, and we can take care of ourselves, and he doesn't have to hang on anymore. And I even told him, while I don't subscribe to the whole religion thing, I told him, your mother and Uncle Anthony and Aunt Tessie, they're all waiting for you. They'll take care of you. And within 15 minutes, he went. He looked at me. His eyes were all glassy, like he turned his head towards me, but I don't believe he saw me.
That's in my followers.
He turned his head towards the window, and he was looking at the sunlight, and he passed away. And in that nanosecond, when I realized he was gone, I took his pulse, I felt his hand, I cried, and I looked at him, and I swear to God, I saw my facial features, I saw my bone structure in that man, and I thought to myself, oh my God, that's going to be me, and I'm not ready for this. And that is when my own mortality came front and center. My parents told me, you don't understand what it is to be an adult until you have your own children. And now I understand you don't know what it is about death until you see, for men, your father pass away, because then you're next. That's the thing that comes into your head.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I can completely relate. Absolutely. Everything you said was like ringing bells in my head when I heard it. That's why I wanted you to repeat it on the show. Absolutely. I saw him laying there. I said, you know what? That's going to be me one day. And who knows when, And it's a scary thought. You start thinking of everything that went wrong with your parent could go wrong with you. And then what you do is you start to say, well, maybe I could avert this or avert that because I eat well and I exercise, and my dad smoked and he drank and he didn't work out, and so it's a crazy thing, and it's very depressing when you start getting into that, because it becomes, you do see your own mortality right in front of you there. It becomes very, very apparent. I think a lot of us don't think about it, but when you're staring it right in the face for whatever it is, you did 4 days, whatever, I've been there for a couple of weeks. It is painful. It's tough.
Well, and see, I just turned 60 in June, and the truth of the matter is that I'm battling some autoimmunity issues.
Oh, you are?
Through my gut. And you know what the funny thing is, Dave? I always thought because I hosted SuperHuman Radio that I was going to be the guy that didn't get sick. I was going to be like strong to the end. And I used to say, I want to go. When I go, I want to go in the hole with 500 pounds on my back. and then all of a sudden, like stuff started malfunctioning, and I'm like, and I'm actually fixing myself. But the reality is that, I'm 60 years old. I go to the gym and I train, but I train with a lot of problems right now. And I'm still pushing. I'm still training hard. And that kind of sobered me up. Like, if I can get this problem, then I can get other problems. And maybe the end for me isn't that far away at all. So I got to really make sure that everything I do on a day-to-day basis is something that I either have to do or that I love to do. In fact, I did a blog post about it that treat every birthday like Mark Twain predicted his own death, that he would die when some comet came back around. And Halley's died. Yeah. Was it Halley's?
Might have been. Yeah. I thought it was.
Well, it was like every 75 years.
Wasn't he born on Halley's Comet and he died on Halley's Comet? I thought that was.
He was born on it and he died on it.
75 years. Yep.
And I thought to myself, what if we knew the day we were going to die? And just for the sake of the blog post, I said, what if you knew you were going to die on your birthday? Right. How would you live that next year differently? Because that's how we should live every year, because we could drop dead any second.
Right. No one knows when you're going. You're right. Yeah. Well, Carl, let's get into a happier topic first, because a lot of bodybuilders suffer with different maladies, and we're always trying to I know as a coach and prep guy and a scientist, I'm always trying to figure out solutions to things. And I know you're very analytical like that as well. You had mentioned to me a good topic that you thought would be great to discuss, and I agreed with you, was these guts, the distended stomachs that a lot of these bodybuilders get. And I'll give you a little, before you give me your insight on it, I want to just say, when I got to a certain size, I was suffering from distended stomach also. And I found that one of the things that really helped me out a lot was fiber, adding dietary fiber in twice a day, because I was eating so much food, I think I wasn't getting rid of it all. That was one of the problems, okay? And that's why I really was high up on creating my own fiber product, which I did in Fiberlize, and it's became a very popular supplement that's available on the market. But that's one of the things. But what I noticed was when I downsized my physique over the course of 15 years from whatever it was, over 300 to down to I'm almost about 195 right now, and I feel really good at this weight. My distended stomach, my thickened abdominal wall, everything came down. And my waist is actually really small right now, and my stomach is flat, and I can vacuum my stomach, and which tells me that a lot of that was hypertrophied muscle, whether it be in the form of the muscle in the abdominal wall or the muscle that's in the organs. The colon has
I would dispute that part. You had me all the way. You're right on. So first of all of the distended stomachs we see in bodybuilding are dietary, because 76% of the American population has gut issues. They have distended stomachs. Right. They burp, they belch. After a meal, they feel like somebody pumped air in there. So this is the general population. Right. They're not using insulin. They're not using PEDs. They're not eating 5,000, 10,000 calories a day. So we have to look for the lowest common denominator of what is possibly going on in our population. Okay. And we're actually doing a show next week that looks at the fact that the increase in probiotic use parallels the increase in small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And there's a good doctor who's saying, stop taking probiotics. You don't need them. But that's a different story. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing is completely dietary, because I'll give you some examples. Lee Priest never had a distended stomach. I'd love to know what he ate and what he didn't eat. But more importantly, in Australia, the quality of food is different than in the United States.
Right, but he was living in the U.S., though, for many, many years, though, Carl, too. Eating Kentucky Fried Chicken by his own admission.
Okay. Well, then I'm wrong about that. I was going to use him as a poster boy. But if we go back in time, Arnold could do a vacuum pose. Right. A lot of these guys could do vacuum poses back then, and they were hypermuscular. Yeah. Maybe not as hypermuscular as some of the bodybuilders today, but nonetheless, the tortoise shell that these guys have today. Yeah. I remember the first time I saw it was Gustavo Bedell, I was like, oh my God. Every time he switched poses and he inhaled, he had to let his stomach out. He looked pregnant. And we see this is rampant today. Yeah. This is inflammation from the esophagus to the anus, Dave. All these guys have GERD. They all have they have obstructive sleep apnea, whether they're treating it or not. Right. They're gassy. They're bloated all the time. They're farting. They have terrible bowel movements, but they're consuming 10,000 calories a day, and they're pushing so much food through them. These guys are inflamed from their anus to their esophagus. And I'm going to say something, and people are going to go, oh, yeah, he's a quack, because they said that about some of the things I said last time. But glyphosate, Roundup, glyphosate is an antimicrobial, and they spray it on crops, okay? Glyphosate is an actual antibiotic. Monsanto has a patent that's 10 years old for combining glyphosate with amoxicillin to treat antibiotic-resistant diseases. Now, think about that. This is something that's sprayed on your crops. Okay. Now, you and I both know what happens when somebody takes low-dose antibiotics. It destroys the lining of the gut. Right. It leads to IBS, to celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis. All of these autoimmune disorders all start because of gut permeability. Right. Well, today, glyphosate is ubiquitous. It's in food. It's in drinks. They're finding it in human breast milk that mothers are feeding their babies. It's in tampons. It's everywhere. And a lot of people don't realize that they're consuming glyphosate throughout the day. They're eating away at the lining of the stomach. Once the lining of the stomach is destroyed, once the gut microbial diversity is destroyed, the stomach, the intestines, the large intestine, the small intestine, they become populated with fungi and with microbes that were never supposed to be there. The small intestine is supposed to be is not supposed to have anything living in it. Right. And everybody's got microbes. That's why if you look at these people, Dave, the distension starts right at the thorax. It just literally pushes out. Right. The small intestine is transverse, right near the liver. It goes right across. That's the small intestine filled with gas and pushing out. And then the stomach just becomes round from there on because the entire intestinal tract is inflamed. So I would predict that if a lot of these bodybuilders did a urine analysis and looked for their glyphosate load, they'd find that it's very high. Right. It takes a long time for the inflammation to go away. It doesn't go away sometimes in a year. You have to, because it didn't become inflamed like that in a year. This is like after decades of exposure. But that's my bet. Look, insulin, testosterone, and estrogen, even oxytocin, all have an effect on microbial diversity. But what we're seeing today is inflammation from the esophagus to the anus. There's no doubt in my mind about this. And they get brain fog from it. They develop other issues from it. If it stays around long enough, the show I'm doing next week links probiotic use and metabolic acidosis. A lot of people don't realize they have metabolic acidosis. They wake up in the morning, they have brain fog. They just take more caffeine. They don't realize that some of the early signs of metabolic acidosis is headaches and waking up in the morning feeling like your head is stuffed with cotton. So
how do you combat that, Carl, do you think?
Okay, so what I'm doing right now to help reverse some of my autoimmune disorders, and it's working for me. The first thing is, you and I don't like enzymes. We had this conversation back in like 2007, right? Yeah. But here's when to take your enzymes. If you take your enzymes with your food, you take hydrochloric acid, amylase, protease, and lipase. Those are the four things you should take. You take those an hour and a half to 2 hours after the meal. I did a show 3 weeks ago about using baking soda before a meal actually makes a lot of the symptoms of autoimmune disorders go away. There's a published study. When I got down to the nitty-gritty, I said to the scientists, so what is it? Is it the alkaline effects of baking soda? Is it the CO2 that's released? He says, no. When you take baking soda, the rebound is to produce more acid in the stomach to overcome the buffering. So what these guys and gals are doing is they're just increasing the acidity of the gut before they introduce the meal. I said, so in other words, enzymes could be used. He goes, yeah, I think so. Well, what I've discovered is if I eat a meal About an hour and a half later, I'm belching.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't be. That meal has moved out of my stomach. So there's undigested food still in my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I take the enzymes. And I swear, the belching goes away immediately.
Really?
Immediately. Yes, yes. And the other thing that it does is this. The duodenum is the vestibule where acidity changes. Mm-hmm. The gut has a high acid, hydrochloric acid, probably a pH of 1. Yeah. pH of 1. The duodenum is where actually bicarbonate is excreted, so that when the food moves into the small intestine, it doesn't have any acid left in it. What's happening here is the duodenum is becoming populated with microbes, and then it just keeps on growing into the small intestine. If you start taking acid enzymes, I got to slow down.
Yeah.
In between your meals, it will actually destroy the microbes in the duodenum and slowly into the small intestine. You can actually rid yourself of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth by starting that. And then obviously avoid all sugars and starches for a period of time, because we're now finding out, you're going to get a kick out of this.
Right.
The culprit microbe are the lactate-producing microbes, Lactobacillus acidophilus, Lactobacillus bifidobacter. These are all lactic acid-producing microbes. These are the ones that are being seeded into the duodenum and the small intestine.
Right.
And these are the and what is everybody taking in probiotics today? Lactobacillus. They're down in kimchi. They eat in yogurt.
Right.
It's all the lactic acid-producing microbes. We're not supposed to have that many of them.
Okay, so but the whole thinking is that everyone is deficient in these microbes, and that's why everyone's taking probiotics. What do you say to that? Well,
we're finding that is an incorrect assumption. You see the problem,
but
Dave?
You just mentioned leaky gut and permeability in the gut because of all the depletion of the good bacteria there. So how do we reseed the colon?
So first of all, what you don't want to do is preferentially plant one type of microbe.
Right.
Okay? And what we've been doing for the past 5 years with the probiotic movement is just giving ourselves one type of microbe. So the first thing is that you got to stop this preferential seeding, number one. Number two, your body will correct, your microbes react to your diet. Microbial diversity changes in as little as 24 hours based on the food you eat. You know what I'm using to help cure myself, Dave? You won't believe. I came home from Ireland after drinking booze and eating bread.
Right.
And I swear to God, I felt friggin' horrible. I just started doing the Geronda diet. I'm eating beef and eggs for every meal. The bloating went away. The gas went away. My stomach is flattening out. And a lot of my symptoms are starting to subside. So it depends on what you eat. That's what will influence what
it seems like you're doing a ketogenic diet. You're sticking to the protein and fats, basically.
But see, what a ketogenic diet to you and a ketogenic diet to me is a better diet than the ketogenic diet that most people are doing today.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I've done 3 shows about this already.
Yeah.
Look, the prevalence of ketosis in our ancestors was only during starvation.
Right.
Now you have to understand something. A half a millimole of ketones in the blood, most people wake up with that if they didn't eat too close to bedtime.
Sure.
That's not what I'm talking about. But today, there's this senseless challenge. Well, how high can you get your keto? Oh, mine's a 4.5 millimole. The only time that happened was if you were starving.
Right.
So that actually creates genetic imprints in you that you are not a good hunter. You're actually a good starver. And that kind of ketogenic diet is not good unless you're battling brain cancer or seizures and you're using it therapeutically.
Right.
The ketogenic diet you and I talk about, which is very high protein, moderate fat, and very low carb, the body goes, oh, we're getting a lot of food. We're producing ketones, maybe 1.5, 2 millimoles a day, but I'm getting a lot of protein. This guy's a good hunter.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so what role do you think that growth hormone, IGF-1, insulin plays in gut distension, if any, in your theory?
I don't believe the notion that people promote completely that IGF-1 and growth hormone cause rampant organ growth. While there is evidence of some organ growth, that's not the reason for the distended stomach.
I agree.
I think that a sensible regimen, like I use growth factor 1 through 29 and GHRP6 every morning and post-workout.
Yeah.
I'm using only 100 micrograms of each because that is the saturation dose for adult men. Huh. You don't need any more than that. I don't get super hungry from it. I don't get flush feeling from it. Right. If I get flush and hungry, then I use too much. That's a sensible regimen. That's not going to cause my gut to blow up. However, these hormones do influence microbial diversity. So, for instance, like I use oxytocin post-workout. All old guys should. And so oxytocin increases a particular microbe called L. reuteri, which is associated with longer lives and better aging. So they do play a role in microbial diversity, but I don't buy the whole it's making me big and fat in my gut. I don't buy that.
Okay. You know, I believe that the anabolics, especially GH and insulin, cause the organs to swell. And I don't know if it's an inflammation thing or if it's just, you know, growth hormone and insulin make all the muscles swell. And that looks good in skeletal muscle, but in smooth muscle, you know, obviously it doesn't because it's all located right in your abdominal area and it's pushing the gut out. So I think there's a combination of what I think your theory is partially right, but I don't think it's complete because we don't see it in natural bodybuilders and they're eating a ton of food, but you see it in way more in GH insulin using bodybuilders, Carl.
Well, and you're right. And that influencing the microbial diversity of the gut could be leading to them being more susceptible to getting that inflammatory response in their gut. There's no doubt about it.
So as a bodybuilder who has to eat all this food, okay, and who has to take these drugs, is there any solution?
I think that you have to be cautious about your choices of starchy carbohydrates, grains. So I just did a show about a study that people can join. If they go to my website, superhumanradio.net, you can join in. There's a glyphosate study right now. You have to pay for your own glyphosate test, but you become part of the study.
How much?
And $99.
That's not
bad. I just got, And so what I think people need to do is they need to become cognizant of foods that have the highest level of glyphosate. Now, wheat does because they use it to synchronize the crop. They literally spray the crop of wheat 2 days before harvesting it so that they kill the wheat and it's easier to thrash and separate and do all that sort of stuff. Okay. Well, there's a couple other crops that I just found out I didn't know about. All beans, legumes, chickpeas, navy beans. They have the highest degree of glyphosate retention because they do the same thing with beans. They're using it to synchronize the crop. And oats, my beloved oatmeal. I have to eat organic oatmeal now because oats was number 3 on the list.
Wow.
So it's wheat, beans, and oats. You have to buy organic.
I heard brown rice, too, has a lot of that, though. Isn't it true?
I don't know about rice because...
Brown rice, I hear, because of the husk.
Well, brown rice, okay, so there's a different issue with things that have husks, right? Any kind of seed,
right?
The anti-nutrients that are designed to keep bugs from eating them are on the shell of the seed. So white rice, they strip the husk off.
Right.
All the anti-nutrients, the lectins are in the husk. That's why I don't eat brown rice for that reason.
Right.
Or wild rice.
Interesting. You know, because you always hear brown rice is better, quinoa, all these, whole grain type stuff. And now we're hearing, it seems like, Carl, every week they come out with a contradicting study. They say one week they say fish oil is good for you, the next week it's not good for you. One week, brown rice, no, white rice, now they're saying eat white rice, don't eat brown rice.
Right.
It's so confusing, even for people like you and me who are kind of in the industry and know on top of the food chain. How does a beginner person know what to eat? And everyone's afraid. So what I tell people is don't listen to anything. Listen to your body.
Yes.
Your body will tell you what foods are not being processed properly and which ones are.
I just did this rant at the end of today's show. I said, if your dietary approach, and let's just call it your diet, requires you to belong to a group, go on cruises with people who eat like you, argue with people who don't, you are making choices not because they're good for you, but because you want to be part of the club. Right. That's not how you should pick your diet.
Yeah, the paleo guys, the vegan people.
The vegans, the paleo, the keto. I mean, come on. There's people on the internet right now they've been on keto for 7, 8 months. They're so depressed. They're losing their hair. And the people tell them, well, just eat more fat. No, get off the friggin' diet. It doesn't work for you.
Yeah. It doesn't work for everyone. Now, you know, it's funny because I was in the store once and I was buying like some I think it was like a red bean burgers. Like they were like burgers, but they were made out of beans. And I just happen to like unusual foods like that. It's not that I'm a vegan, because I eat plenty of chicken and fish and stuff like that. But someone saw me there and she's like, "Oh, you're a vegan too? Good job!" Like, and I was like, I didn't want to disappoint her. I'm like, yeah. No, way to go. What else do you like here? Let's get some huda soy and all these other great, you know, vegan stuff. But you know, I just think it's hysterical. You're right. It's like a club. People want to belong to the club. The funny thing is, I like the old Woody Allen line that he kind of was, I guess, paraphrasing Groucho Marx. I wouldn't want to belong to any club that would have someone like me as a member. You know, that's
right.
The old
That's
joke.
funny. Yeah, but it's what happens is when diet becomes dogma, you've lost all rational, critical thinking to approach the diet. If you eat something and you don't feel good, but the rest of the people in your club eat it, then you don't belong in that club because you don't belong. You should be eating that food. That's it. Simple.
All right, well, very good advice. Hopefully maybe some people learn some stuff about distended abdomens. I still think it has a lot to do also with the structure of the person. People with long torsos tend to have less distension. People with shorter torsos, like Kai Green, tend to have more distension. But yeah, I think that the foods we're eating are definitely influencing it, and you shed some really interesting light on some of these topics. The question, Carl, before I let you go, is how do we get these ingredients that are sprayed all over our crops and all over everything? What do you do? How do you not get them in your diet?
You know what? First of all, there was no glyphosate found in meat, like beef. There was no glyphosate found in chicken. There was no glyphosate found in booze, believe it or not. And he thinks that it was because the fermentation process actually broke it down or denatured it or whatever. You have to find out, first of all, what your glyphosate exposure has been.
Right.
You got to get tested. People hate to test. They just want to buy something. Well, that sounds like me. I'll buy it. You don't even know if it's going to work for you because you don't know if that's why you feel that way. But get tested and learn which foods are high in glyphosate and avoid them. It can be done. It takes a little discipline. But look, serious bodybuilders, they're eating chicken and broccoli 6 meals a day. If anybody can do it, they can.
Sure.
The average person, a long time ago, and you and I have actually talked about this, I divorced myself from flavor. I'm not a gastronomist. I don't want to have to bathe in a chipotle sauce. No, give me a steak, give me 4 or 5 eggs. I'm happy.
Yeah.
So if you are driven by gastronomy, you have to have sexy, amazing dishes, Michelin star restaurants.
Right.
You're going to be exposed to a lot more of this stuff, unfortunately, because that's where they're using it. They're using it in all these commercial establishments. But learn what has glyphosate on it. Listen to that show I just did. I forget what show number it is, but it's at superhumanradio.net. And learn what has glyphosate on it and do your best to avoid it. Get tested. Eliminate those foods. Get tested again. Very, very simple.
You know what, Carl? I'm going back to I think I'm going to go back to my original diet that worked for me when I was at my biggest and my hardest and freakiest. And I think it was probably the safest diet. I'm going back to eating McDonald's every day because I think that's the only, at least you know what's in it. McDonald's you can go to China and get McDonald's. You can eat McDonald's in California. It's the same McDonald's you're going to get. And you know what? I think artificial foods like that, the way McDonald's is made, is the wave of the future. It's probably the safest. At least you know what they're putting in the stuff.
Well, so on that note, when I don't bring food to the studio and I get hungry, I go to Wendy's.
Yeah.
And I ask them to off the a la carte menu.
Yeah.
I say, can you? And they say, sure. And I go, give me 6 beef patties, the large ones. So that's 1.5 pounds of beef. And I sit there and I eat them, and they look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's safe. I know what's in it. It's just beef and salt, and that's it.
Right. It's flavoring and beef. See? After all this, everyone thought they were going to take home this very wise, insightful, nutritional mantra and secret. And the bottom line is, Carl and I are telling you, go freaking eat fast food. That's the bottom line. It's the safest thing that you can possibly eat. And on that note, we're out of time. Until next time, I'm Dave Palumbo with Carl Lanore for another edition of Live With.